Hi everyone, it's Amber Beltran and I am so excited to be teaming up with Nature's Fragrance again to bring you another cold process soap making video. I am really looking forward to today's video because we are going to be going back to basics and I'm going to be sharing with you a cold process soap making recipe that is very simple and easy to make, so really beginner friendly, but it makes for a really great bar soap too. So I'm going to be showing you how I do that, and I'm going to be sharing the recipe from start to finish so that if you would like to use this recipe in your own soapy creations at home, you are absolutely more than welcome to do so. Another thing I'm really excited about is the fragrance oil that we're going to be using today. It is a fragrance oil from Nature's Fragrance that is quite possibly one of my all-time absolute favorite fragrance oils. It just so happens that this particular fragrance oil does discolor in cold process soap, but I'm also going to be showing you how to use that to your design advantage. So stay tuned and let's get to making some soap. All right, let's make a cold process soap batch from start to finish. So first thing that I do is I get my lye solution ready to go, made and ready. Reason why I start with the lye solution first is because your lye solution can actually heat up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit in less than 3 seconds. So that's the number one thing that I personally like to do first so that I can get that cooling while I work on the other parts of my soap making. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to need is distilled water and lye. This is a 32-ounce recipe, and I will be superfatting this recipe at 5%, and I'll also be using a 2-to-1 water to lye ratio, which is approximately a 33% lye solution. So for a recipe of this size, 32-ounce oil recipe, we are going to need 9.2 ounces of distilled water. Almost there. Perfect. 9.2 ounces. And then we're going to want to weigh out our lye solution in a separate container. I have my little handy dandy lye cup. And superfatted at 5%, that is going to call for 4.6 ounces of lye. So we are going to add our lye to our liquid, never the other way around. And I am just going to very slowly pour it in and give it a good stir. Okay, the lye solution is made and it is very, very hot. So we are going to let this cool while we continue on with the other steps of our recipe. Go ahead, and while that's cooling, we'll start with, actually I'm jumping ahead of myself. I will start with my kaolin clay slurry. Every batch that I make, whether or not a fragrance oil needs it, I always make a kaolin clay slurry with my fragrance oils. And as I explained in my previous video, kaolin clay slurries are just a really nice, inexpensive way of adding a fixative or creating a fixative for your fragrance oil in your soap to give it the best chance possible of being as fragrant and as long-lasting as it can possibly be in your soap. And so like I said, whether or not a fragrance oil needs it, I add it anyway, just because kaolin clay is also very, very skin loving too. So it is a win-win. So the first thing I do, pull my handy dandy scale back out, is I am going to weigh out my fragrance oil. And for this recipe, I'm going to be using the fragrance oil at 1 ounce per pound of oils. And so that equals out to 2 ounces of fragrance oils. That is a usage rate of just a hair over 6%. But this particular fragrance oil has a max soap usage rate of 8.33%, and as long as we do not go over that IFRA max, we are good to use it at that amount. So we'll go ahead and get this weighed out. And the fragrance oil I am using today. Let me just talk really quick about this fragrance oil. The fragrance oil we're using today, and I apologize that this is actually in one of Nature's Fragrance's older bottles, so you can tell that I need to order more. But the fragrance oil that I'm using today, I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if it's... is Nature's Fragrance Tobacco and Leather. This fragrance oil is... it is sexiness in a bottle. I love it so much. This particular fragrance is actually one of my husband's personal favorites. I use it in a custom blend that I make for him, and the scent is just absolutely intoxicating. To me, it smells like, honestly, to me, if I had to describe this scent, you know the Dos Equis guy, the guy that does all the commercials, like the most interesting man in the world, Dos Equis guy? To me, this is what he smells like. I don't know why, but when I smell it, that's what I think of. I think of the most interesting man in the world. Like, it is just, it's rich, it's warm, it's sexy. It has notes of, it's not a spicy scent, but I smell like a coriander note in there, like a warm spice note, and then I get a very slightly organically sweet, not a sugary sweet, like an organically sweet tobacco, like tobacco leaf scent, and not necessarily leather, more of like a soft suede note. Like, just, it's such a sophisticated scent, and it is absolutely incredible in cold processed soap. I can't get enough of this scent. This is one of my all-time absolute favorite fragrances. So I've got this weighed out, and I'm going to show you how I make my kale and clay slurry. So I just grab my bag of kale and clay, and I get a little, this is a 4-way measuring spoon, and for me, I know that some people add less and some people add more. I believe it's just all personal preference, but for me, for every ounce of fragrance oil that I'm going to be using in my recipe, I add a generous teaspoon of kale and clay directly to the fragrance oil. So that means we'll be using 2 generous teaspoons of kale and clay to be added directly to the fragrance oil. So there's 1. And 2. So the clay is going to, because it is heavier than the fragrance oil, it's going to want to settle down at the bottom. So what I like to do is just mix that up with my little hand mixer and just get it fully incorporated into that fragrance oil. And if you would like to do this 24 hours in advance before you make your soap batch, that's absolutely okay too. And in fact, it's even better in my opinion. The sooner you add the clay, to me, the more potent your kale and clay slurry fixative will be. But this scent is so wonderfully potent on its own. It's a fragrance oil that just really doesn't need it. But like I said, I love adding kaolin clay to my soaps anyway, so I make the slurry with every single one of my fragrance oils. But I just mix it in, and eventually it's going to want to settle down to the bottom again, the clay is. And when it does that, I just hit it with my little hand mixer again and mix it back up again, no worries. But yeah, you can make your kaolin clay slurries 18 to 24 hours in advance before you make your soap batch, and just let it sit and let that clay absorb as much of the fragrance oil as it possibly can. So we got that all mixed up, and I'm just going to let this sit. I'm going to let the clay and the fragrance oil get married to each other, so I'm just going to set it off to the side. So while that is happening, I'll go ahead and I will get my sodium lactate weighed out. For this recipe, I use my sodium lactate at 3% in my recipes, and that's 3% of how many oils are in the recipe. And so for this recipe, 3% is, it's like 0.96. I just round it up to 1 ounce even because my scale doesn't do little in-between numbers like that. So it's just a touch over a 3% usage rate that we'll be using today. So I will go ahead and weigh out 1 ounce of sodium lactate. So set that off to the side, have 1 ounce of that weighed out. And we'll go ahead and we'll get started with our batch oils. So the hard oils in this recipe are lard and coconut. Now, if you want to make this recipe a vegan recipe, you can absolutely do that by substituting the lard out for palm oil or palm shortening. Just make sure that whenever you're doing any kind of substitution with a recipe, that you run it through a lye calculator again. So, but for today, this is going to have 30% lard and 30% coconut oil in it as our hard oils. And hard oils are just those oils in your recipes that are usually hard at room temperature, and then your soft oils are those oils that are liquid at room temperature. So let me get this ready. We'll go ahead and we will weigh out our hard oils first so that we can get those melted down. So our first one is the lard, like I said, and we need that at 30%. 30% in this recipe is 9.6 ounces. So I'm going to weigh out 9.6 ounces of lard. And the properties that lard brings to a batch of soap is it is going to contribute a little bit to bar hardness. It is going to contribute to a really creamy and conditioning feel of the bar. Perfect, 9.6 ounces. Our next hard oil in this recipe is coconut oil, and we're going to use that at 30%, which for a batch of this size will also be 9.6 ounces. Now, I live in Florida, so in the summertime, my coconut oil, unfortunately, it's not hard at room temperature. I think I only get 2 months out of the whole year when my coconut oil is actually hard at room temperature. But despite the fact that it does look liquid, it is considered a hard oil. And when it comes to coconut oil, the properties that it will bring to your bar of soap is cleansing and lather. All right, 9.6 ounces on the dot, that's what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get these melted down. All right, so I've melted down my hard oils in the microwave. As you can see, it's not completely melted down all the way. A little bit of stirring with the spatula is going to get that to melt down completely. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. All right, beautiful. Our hard oils are melted down, and we can continue on to our soft oils in our recipe. The soft oils in this recipe are olive oil and castor oil. Olive oil, the properties that brings to your soap is it's very, very mild, it's very gentle and skin loving, and it's also very moisturizing too. And then castor oil, skin loving as well, and a little bit goes a long way to make for some big copious bubbles. So, first soft oil, olive oil. In this recipe, we'll be using it at 35%. So that means we need 11.2 ounces of 11.2. And last but certainly not least is our castor oil, which again is going to bring us some really great lather. 5%. We need 1.6 ounces. All right, 1.6 ounces of castor oil is mixed in with our other oils, and we're good. We've got all our batch oils all mixed in together and ready. So we have now added all our batch oils into our pot, and I'm just going to give them a little stir and get them all combined together. And these are also a little too warm. I can tell just by feeling the container. So I'm going to let this cool down. I'm just going to let it cool down at room temp, and it should cool down pretty quickly. So I'm going to set this off to the side, and while I'm waiting for those to cool and my lye solution to cool, I will get the mica colors ready. So since this is kind of like a double parter of making a basic soap batch and then also using a discoloring fragrance oil to your advantage, I'm going to get our mica colors ready. And since this fragrance oil, like I said, it does discolor to a very beautiful, rich brown color, we can already assume that one of the colors in our soap is going to be brown. So I'm just going to go ahead and help that along. And I am going to use a brown mica to color the main batch of it, because I feel like if you can't beat it, join it. It's already going to turn brown, and I like to be able to see what my design is going to look like already as I'm making the soap. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to beat it to the punch, and I'm going to color it brown before it can decide to turn brown on me. So I am going to be using this latte mica from Micas and More, and then as an accent color, I am going to be using, also from Micas and More, it's called Luster Blue, and I'm only going to be using one accent color today just because this is a simple batch, and so I do want to keep it simple, but I just want to be able to show you how to incorporate color into a batch using a fragrance oil that does discolor, and how, like I said, to use that to your design advantage. So just one color today, nothing crazy, but just to demonstrate how you can do that. But we'll go ahead and I'm going to get my micas pre-dispersed in a little bit of light carrier oil, and there are a few light carrier oils that you can use to disperse your micas in if you choose to pre-disperse them in a carrier oil. And some examples of those oils are olive oil, sunflower oil, sweet almond oil, and grapeseed oil. All make really good light carrier oils that you can pre-disperse your mica colors into. So I'll grab a little cup for each color. And since the brown mica is going to be the main color here, I'm going to add a teaspoon of that, a generous teaspoon. Alright, so we got a teaspoon in here. These little micro scoops are a 1/4 teaspoon each. And since this is just an accent color, I think I will just use 1/2 a teaspoon. 1 and 2. So that's a 1/2 teaspoon right there. these pre-dispersed in a little bit of olive. I've got a little beaker of olive oil over here, and I'm going to add just enough olive oil just to get these nice and dispersed. That's a nice consistency right there. Not a ton of oil, but just enough to fully disperse the mica in the oil. And same for this luster. That's perfect. So there it is, nice and dispersed. Not a lot of oil, but just enough to where there's no clumps. Perfect. I'm going to set those off to the side, and I'm going to check on my lye solution. I'm going to check on my melted down batch oils, and I'm going to check their temps, and as soon as they get to room temperature, I want them to at least be 85 degrees or under. That's just the temp that I prefer working at. That's when we'll start making some soap. So I will bring you back when our lye solution and our batch oils are at least 85 degrees or cooler. All right, so our base oils and our lye water have now cooled down. We are at room temperature and we are ready to continue our soap making project. So the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the sodium lactate to our cooled lye solution. Give that a good stir in there. And now we can add it to our base oils. Go ahead and gently pour it in. Get it all in there. And just gonna stir it in by hand before I start hitting it with my stick blender. Okay, so now I'm going to stick blend, and I'm gonna stick blend till just past emulsion to a light trace. Light trace being reached. Just going to give it a little stir by hand. Get out any air bubbles I may have put in there and get everything up off the sides too. Okay, and since this incredibly sexy fragrance oil does discolor to a warm, rich brown, like I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to help that along. I'm going to embrace it, and I'm going to color most of this batch brown, and then we're going to put in an accent of blue. So I'm going to pour off a little bit for our blue. Should be good. And I'll go ahead and I'll mix in that blue mica. And to keep the design simple, since we are keeping this a simple batch, I'm just going to do a quick, simple, easy drop swirl with it. And for the rest of our batch, I'm going to put in that brown mica. Clean that up a little bit. Ooh, that's a pretty brown. Just get it up off the sides, make sure it's all mixed in uniformly. Okay, so my colors are stirred in, looking good, and I'm going to add my fragrance oil. And I'm only going to add the fragrance oil to the brown portion. The blue portion I'm going to leave unscented so that it is unhindered by any kind of discoloration. Go ahead and give the fragrance oil one last little hit with our mini mixer. And get that stirred into our brown portion. Oh, it smells so good. The amount of love that I have for this fragrance oil, it is just ridiculous. So I'm going to stir this in by hand. The last batch I made, I did notice a slight bit of acceleration with this fragrance oil, but then again, I was also using a different recipe, and that recipe is a little bit faster moving, so I don't anticipate any problems, but you never know. So far, looking absolutely beautiful, though. Oh, that smells so good. Time to get it poured. So I'm going to do a big layer of brown on the bottom. And then drop swirl in this beautiful blue color. Swirl in a little bit more brown. And repeat with the blue. And I'm going to reserve just a little bit of that blue for the top. Looking good. Lovely. This is behaving absolutely beautifully. So I'm going to go ahead and just pour it over my spatula so I can get the top covered without breaking through too much of the blue. Because it's not accelerating at all. In fact, it is staying so beautifully fluid and wonderfully workable. There we go. I'm going to give this a little tap down on the counter. Get out any air bubbles. Wow. And I am so impressed with how fluid this batter is staying. So that just goes to show everything is recipe dependent. Because this recipe is very forgiving too. I'm just going to cover the top with that blue, just a little accent. And then to top it off, I'm just going to take my bamboo skewer. I'm just going to kind of swirl it around just a little bit. just to get some nice little blue swirls on the top too. Wow, that stayed absolutely beautifully fluid and workable, and my workspace is just filled with this amazing scent. So just such a pleasure to soap with, and like I said, such a great recipe to work with. It's very simple, so beginner friendly, but it's gonna make a great bar of soap, and just like I said, really easy to work with too. It's a forgiving recipe. So I am going to get the top sprayed with some 91% rubbing alcohol. This will help prevent soda ash. Just give that a spritz with the rubbing alcohol. Now from here, I personally love a good C-pop batch of soap. So I am actually going to C-pop this baby. But if you're unfamiliar with C-pop, or you just prefer not to gel your soaps, or you just don't want to C-pop, what you would do at this point is just cover it up and insulate it. So I'll show you how you would do that. So for me, whenever I'm doing a batch of soap that I don't want to C-pop, or I just stick a box over it, and this is the box that the mold came in, so it worked out perfectly. And then I just take an old towel and I drape it in the towel like so, and then it'll stay there for about 18 to 24 hours. I'll come back the next day and I'll cut it up. So we are back the next day for the cut of tobacco and leather soap, and I am so excited to get this thing cut open, see how it looks. It's smelling absolutely amazing today. So I actually unmolded this batch last night, about 8 hours after I poured it, thanks to the magic of sodium lactate and C-pop. And C-pop just stands for cold process oven process, and I will definitely touch on that in a future video for anyone interested in that as well. But I just wanted to wait for today to get it cut. So yeah, let's go ahead and see what we got. There we go. Woo! That's gelled soap for you. It's hard. Okay, we'll take out our first piece. Oh, awesome. That turned out great. So as you can see, it's got nice blue swirls going on in the bar. And our brown portion, it's probably going to discolor a little bit darker as the soap cures, but it's still a nice way to add some color to a discoloring fragrance oil. And you can add as many colors as you'd like. Just make sure with a discoloring fragrance oil that you add the fragrance to your darker colors, so your browns, blacks, things like that. And then with your lighter colors, just leave those unscented so that they are not affected by the discoloration of the fragrance oil. But these swirls turned out great. A really good definition. Just absolutely beautiful. Oh, it smells so good. Have I mentioned how much I absolutely love this fragrance oil? And it just behaved so beautifully. So from here, I'm going to trim up my bars a little bit, pretty them up. As you can see, when you slice through them, you get these edges here. I'm going to show you really quick how I trim those up. And then they will go on the curing rack for 4 to 6 weeks. And after that, they will be enjoyed. And the last, I wanted to quickly touch on a subject. Sometimes cure and saponification can get mixed up or misunderstood between each other. So saponification is the process in which a lye molecule bonds with a fat oil or oil molecule and becomes soap. And the saponification process can happen, usually happens anywhere between 18 to 24 hours in a cold process soap batch. In a situation like this in CPOP or cold process oven process actually speeds up saponification, and so cold process oven process soaps, they complete their saponification process a little bit sooner. But saponification is usually complete within 24 hours of making your cold process soap. Now, cure is completely different from saponification. Cure is that process in which you will want to cure your bars to evaporate out the excess liquid in the soap. A fully cured bar will be milder on the skin, it will be harder and longer lasting in the shower, and it will lather better. And to cure it, you just want to place it on a shelf or a wire coated or a coated wire rack, and in a well ventilated area where the air can touch all sides of the bar. And in 4 to 6 weeks, you'll have a really great bar of soap to use and enjoy. So I will go ahead and quickly show you how I trim up my bars after I cut them, and then after that I'm going to let them cure up so that they can be enjoyed by my family. So when it comes to trimming up your cold process soap or cleaning it up a little bit, you have actually 3 options. 1, don't clean it up at all, because a handmade soap, when it looks handmade, it's awesome and it's wholesome and beautiful. So if you don't want to trim up your cold process soaps, absolutely leave them as they are in all their beautiful handmade glory. If you prefer to trim up your soaps, you can use a potato peeler to trim off the edges, and that kind of will round the edges off a little bit too. Or what I like to do, since I don't like to lose any of my soap from the bar, I like to just trim off just that little bit that the wire cutter kind of left a little drag mark. So what I do is I just take a straight edge knife, and it's a very sharp, just non-serrated knife, and I just very carefully, and we'll get started, just trim that off. So that excess is now off of that bar. And same thing for the other side. It's got a little bit of drag from the wire cutter. So I'm just going to very gently just shave that off, like so. And the bar is nice and trimmed up, looking pretty. I'll show you one more time. So again, it's got some of these little drag marks going on from our wire cutter. So I'm just going to take my knife and very gently shave that off. And do the same for the other side. And this is just something that I prefer to do. However you prefer it is absolutely right. There's no right or wrong when it comes to cleaning up or not cleaning up your handmade soaps. But what that will leave behind is just these little curls of soap. And I just prefer that because it cuts off a lot less soap than taking a potato peeler would to the edges of the bar. So I'm going to finish up just cleaning up these bars, and then I'm going to get them on the curing rack. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch this video, and thank you so much to Nature's Fragrance for allowing me to continue to make them. If you would like to try this incredible fragrance oil or other fantastic fragrances in your own crafty creations at home, go ahead and visit Nature's Fragrance website at www.naturesfragrance.com. And if you have any questions related to all things handmade, head on over to the Candle and Bath and Body Making for Beginners by Nature's Fragrance on Facebook and join us in on the crafty discussions. We would really love to see you there. So a fellow moderator in that group, Jamie Wark, hi Jamie, she had mentioned to me the other day that I had missed my opportunity as a motivational speaker, and that really touched me and it inspired me. So to close this video, I thought it would be fun to just leave you all with a quick inspirational quote. So it is by Jen Sincero, and she says, "Try new things, step out of your comfort zone, take risks, do things in ways you've never done them before. Ask for help, surround yourself with self-actualized people, become obsessed with the fact that you have one go-around on this planet as the you that is you, and realize how precious and important it is not to squander that." So I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful day, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye!